everybody. Welcome to another episode of Expert Insights. Today, I am joined by Bob Johnson. He's the Executive Vice President at Odessa, a platform provider at the core of auto and equipment lending operations, powering everything from origination through servicing and portfolio management. Bob, welcome, and thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Sharon. It's nice to be here.
So I know with your experience in asset and auto finance and Odessa's view across the full lending lifecycle, I expect you'll have a unique perspective on kind of what's changing in the market and where lenders are feeling pressure. And then we can connect the dots, hopefully, to what all of this means for customer communications. So let's just start with the lending lifecycle itself, because I know in the past when someone would buy and finance a car, it would be fairly paper-based. So maybe just explain to us what's changed of late.
Not much, to be honest with you. So it is still very much that same model. You go to the dealership, spend quite a few hours there shopping for your car, and then you go through the process of filling out lots and lots of paperwork, and eventually you get approved for the loan or the lease. You receive an invoice in the mail, and you start making your monthly payments from there. A few years ago, though, it did start to change a bit where you, instead of going to the dealership, if you wanted to, you could shop from home. What people found out was you were shopping from home. It wasn't a pure paperless experience either. You would only be able to get that transaction so far, and then you'd have to go back into the dealership and spend a few hours there as you filled out all the paperwork. But still at the dealerships, most places are still very, very paper driven, but they're trying to get away from that. And we're trying to get away from that in our industry too. We want everything to be more digital.
Okay. And do you find that as things are becoming more digital, it's no longer just, producing static batch documents for all these communications, that there is a lot more interactive engagement? And the reason I'm asking is I was just reading about how sometimes there are more digital transactions that are real time. Like if you're making a payment, then a communication would be kind of triggered. Do you have insights into that?
The days of batch processing, we still need to have batch processing to move from one date to another. So there has to be activities that occur during batch. But what you just described is exactly the model everybody wants to move to. They want real-time data and real-time transactions. And if you don't have a platform that can trigger those transactions, whether it's a financial transaction or producing a document, you're really behind the times. So you have to be fully real-time for the most part.
Okay, and then do you also find that because you're not as focused on document generation, you're more focused on managing these kind of triggered notifications and interactions, that there's an additional volume that this is creating to manage, and or additional like data variation? Has the data complexity really ratcheted up?
Yeah. Yes, there is a change in the volumes. The core parts of that, though, remain the same. So anytime there's a monthly invoice that's being produced, that only occurs once a month. But there's interactions with the platform on a daily basis that needs to have real-time data, and especially now that you mentioned earlier about what are we seeing in the industry. A lot of it's been AI. Now, you can't really take the benefits of AI if you have to wait for batch processing to happen. You want to do that in a real-time environment. So whether it's a financial transaction or a digital communication being produced, you want to be able to do that real-time and avoid batch processing. And when you do that real-time processing, now you have options to, you're going to have more volume, you're going to have more transactions being produced, and it's really up to the finance company how they want to interact with their customers. So if they want to have more interaction, they can increase those triggers. If they don't want to have that interaction, they don't have to. But we're seeing more and more are trying to stay in communications with their customers earlier and more often.
Right. Yeah. You hear all about the orchestration of the journey, how one thing will trigger something else and trigger something else. Do you find that a lot of lenders are actually moving towards that orchestration?
Yeah, absolutely. And orchestration is a very good word for it as well. So in what I do, we're the core platform. So we do the, as you mentioned earlier, we do origination, we do servicing, we do the remarketing of that asset, whether it's in a piece of equipment or an automobile or a delivery truck. Although we're, a major part of a financial institution's infrastructure, there's other platforms and systems and departments that use all these different platforms. And so I have the ability to create physical documents and digital documents from my platform, but that financial institution, that bank or that automotive finance company could be using 10, 20, 30 other platforms that are also producing digital communications. And now you're getting, this disjointed communication. Mm-hmm. And so you need someone like your company to come in and be that orchestration layer that can take all this information and all this data from all these various sources and produce common looking communications, whether it's producing a file for print or it's producing a text or an email or whatever that is. You need somebody that's taking in all that transaction and interpreting too. It's just not taking it and saying, oh, I need to produce a statement or I need to produce a delinquency letter. It's really taking the data and those trigger points that we talked about earlier. I need to produce something to get this end result. And so that's why, they need a company like yours to have all that orchestration, that they can basically be the conductor of all this data that's coming through the platform.
Something I've read about called explainable AI. So if your AI is being used to, make decisions, there's a requirement in the customer communications to explain, like almost as an disclosure, what kinds of things the AI has impacted. Do you come across that?
A little bit. As we mature in this space around AI, you're going to see more of that because it does take all your customer data, and again, it's producing these outcomes, producing these results, and there's going to be some legal aspects to that too that needs to be disclosed to customers. So we are seeing that, but AI is going to drive almost everything we do, and we're seeing it now. The adoption has come along so quickly. So in your space, in my space, we're seeing more and more of it now. The finance companies that I talk to, they're really not sure how far they can take it. They have to. It's a coordinated effort between operations and their legal team to see how much AI they can introduce into their systems and into their customers' daily life. 15, 20 years ago, they were very reluctant to allow you to self-serve. So they had these portals, but they didn't allow you to do everything on the portals. It was like you go in and you can just view your balance. That's about it. Then a few years later, it was wide open. You could go in and make payments, change of address, really whatever you wanted to do. That kept you out of the customer service area, so you didn't have to call in and talk to a person. And I think we're going to see that with AI too. As people get more and more comfortable with it and it's adopted more, it becomes part of our daily life. You're going to see the finance companies adopting it as well.
Okay, well, that's interesting. I'm curious to see how that all rolls out. Maybe you can tell me a little bit about compliance, because I've been researching the borrower's environment in terms of delinquencies. Like I was reading that the Fed was explaining that delinquencies are at an all-time high since the pandemic, and that there's a lot of financial strain on borrowers in terms of them lengthening their or having larger loans and having longer repayment. And I know that with a vehicle being more than a luxury, it's really an essential for daily life. I know it's fairly highly regulated. Can you talk about how the environment and the increasing delinquencies, et cetera, would impact customer communications? And if you're seeing any kind of trends in that regard?
Yeah. So, it's just the nature of the economy right now. You said, coming out of COVID, interest rates were low. Now they're creeping up. They're very high. We have inflation. We have tariffs. We have high oil prices. So, everything in our daily life is getting more and more expensive. And it's the same thing with the cars. Vehicles, they used to be, 3-year terms. And then the norm became 4 years. Then the norm was 5 years for a long time. And now they're 6 and 7-year terms on many of these vehicles, because the cost to produce those vehicles is so expensive now that the only way you can get the monthly either lease price or the payment is by extending the term. And even that's not helping people when now they're being crunched other ways. So their heating bills are going up, their grocery bills are going up. And so that's why we're seeing a lot of the delinquency. And it's not only at the subprime level, we're starting to see it creep into the prime level too. So it's really affecting everybody. And what you want to, there used to be the old days, if you were delinquent on your account, you hit a certain number of days delinquency, it ended up in someone's queue and they just start calling you. Where the work that you do and AI comes into this is the term I use, and it might not be the proper term, but I call it compassionate collections, where they're not chasing you as much as they used to. So they're using AI to determine, okay, what's the right time to call this person? How's the best way to communicate with this person? Do we even have to? Even though they're late, there's a trend of, we know they're going to pay. They're going to pay eventually. So why waste all of our resources in chasing somebody that we know is going to pay anyway? They may pay late, but they're going to pay. There's ways of using AI to build payment structures around when their payday is as well, or even trying to collect them closer to their payday when you know that they have the money in their bank. So there's lots of ways of doing it now. So that's where that term of compassionate collections comes in, is because you're using digital communications, you're using AI. In the past, it was machine learning. Now it's AI to see a trend in this customer and basically react off of the trends of that of the paying patterns of that customer.
So it's much more targeted. It sounds like it's much more almost thoughtful and informed.
Before it was a shotgun. You just went after everybody who was, as soon as they were, 31 days late, you started your campaigning to try to get the dollars in the door. Now, it's much more targeted. They take that subset of delinquency and they can whittle that down to the ones they know they have to get in contact with.
Okay. And what about the regulations around that? Because I know delinquency communications are fairly regulated in what you can say and when you can say it and how you can say it.
Absolutely. It's fairly regulated. It's state driven. How you speak to someone on the phone, when you create the communication, whether it's a text message or a letter, a digital letter, or his email. There's certain things you can say. There's legalese that's built into that too, and that's another advantage of having an orchestration layer to sort through all that, and AI, and it goes out and it collects the right legalese and the right language for that particular correspondence. And it also dictates how the collections person communicates with the customer when they do get them on the phone, if they need to. If they don't have to, that's even better. It eliminates a lot of that compliance if you realize you don't have to communicate with that person. And that's where the AI comes in.
Okay, well, that's very interesting. In terms of other trends that you see going on in the market or in your business, maybe you can just point to some that you think are most relevant right now, or you see percolating up to the surface in terms of the people that you deal with.
Again, it's what we've been talking about. It's AI, and what are we going to be able to do with AI today and tomorrow? So the companies that really embrace AI and start incorporating into all these different use cases are going to be the ones that are most successful. And then when we talk about digital communications, an orchestration layer, those are areas of big lift, I believe, with that finance companies will see, because it's a lot of manual effort to collect from somebody. So it's a lot of money sending out physical mail. It's a lot of money sending out physical invoices. So streamlining that and making it as digital as possible, and only producing the communication when needed, is going to be very, very important, to this industry.
And you're talking mostly to, when you make these comments, you're talking mostly to operations managers at lenders or compliance or?
It's everybody. Operations obviously wants to save money. So if they can reduce headcount or reduce the number of activities that their staff is working on, and they're working on the right things, not chasing things that they don't need to be chasing, that saves money. It saves money on the compliance side if they've built the various triggers in place, the various checks and balances in place to make sure that they are compliant. That ultimately saves money. I don't know if it's going to affect the customer, if it's going to bring prices down, but who knows? It might be able to. Unfortunately, I've seen that with inflation, once a company raises the price on something, it usually stays up. But
Right.
There might be an opportunity for companies to be able to save money and pass that on to their customers. The more efficient they get, and the more digital they are, and the more the electronic processing of transactions.
Okay. So if, as we wrap up, if you would give one piece of advice to a leader in auto finance or equipment financing with regard to their customer communications, like what next steps should they be pursuing? What would you advise them?
It's going to sound like an advertisement, but they should be talking to companies like yourself. Again, it's a very important role in the overall life cycle of a customer, and it's a role that, again, is not in the past it was whatever system had the communication, we'll just go with that one. But again, it goes back to what I said earlier. All these disparate platforms all producing communications differently. You want to have a consistent experience for your customer. And that's where a company like yours with that robust orchestration layer comes into play, because it can take all this data from all these different sources and not only produce the communications, but also when to produce the communication, when not to produce the communication, all the tracking that goes into it. For the customers that still want physical mail, building in those triggers to track that piece of mail that goes through the process, to help with returns, that's expensive. So there's so many ways that companies can save money that they're really not thinking of, and it's sitting right in front of them if they take a closer look.
Awesome. Well, Bob, I just want to thank you so much. This has been very interesting, and I think you've given us a view into kind of the pressures that auto and equipment lenders are facing, and direction that they can take in terms of where the industry is going with AI, with the orchestration layer, and with giving them the right communication at the right time if needed. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone.